After losing my apartment following a messy divorce, I jokingly asked the old janitor from our building to be my husband. He nodded seriously, and an hour later we were married. I thought it was a huge mistake, but the next morning a lawyer in an expensive suit knocked on my door. He looked at me with respect and asked, "Do you even realize that you are now the wealthiest woman in this city?" Hello everyone. Write in the comments where you are tuning in from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Enjoy the story. But before this crazy story turned Zora's life upside down, before big money and even bigger problems came knocking at her door, it was just a regular gray morning. One of thousands just like it. The alarm didn't ring loudly, just gave a soft click. But that was enough for Zora. 5 o'clock in the morning. Outside the window, in the thick darkness of a late autumn, the whole city was still asleep. The neighbors behind the wall were asleep. The birds under the eaves were asleep, and her 9-year-old daughter Nia was sleeping soundly in the next room. Zora sat up in bed, rubbing her lower back with a practiced motion. She was only 37, but her back in the mornings reminded her that the work of a school cafeteria cook didn't forgive weakness. The hand she rested on her knees looked older than she was. Her deep mahogany skin was a little dry from constant water and cleaning supplies. Her nails were cut short. On her index finger, there was a small, almost healed burn from the oven. She stood up, trying not to make the floorboards creak. This apartment, an old pre-war brownstone with high ceilings and crown molding, had been left to her by her grandpa. Grandpa was a strict but fair man, and the apartment matched him perfectly. Solid, sturdy, smelling of old hardwood floors and book dust. Here Zora felt safe. The walls were thick, reliable. It seemed that no storms from the outside world could break through here. In the kitchen, she turned on only the small lamp above the table. The kettle hissed, and Zora leaned her forehead against the cool window pane for a minute. Down below, the courtyard was empty. Only the wind chased fallen leaves across the asphalt, and a shadow flickered near the dumpsters. Probably a cat. "Everything's going to be all right," she whispered to her reflection in the dark glass. This had been her mantra for the last 6 months. The divorce from Tyrell hadn't exhausted her with scandals. No, Tyrell didn't know how to make a scene. He had exhausted her with his quiet, sticky helplessness. He went back to his mama, to Glenda Boudreaux, because mama is lonely, and because mama thinks we aren't right for each other. Zora didn't hold him back. You can't hold water in a SIE. She quickly finished her tea, dressed simply and comfortably, no bright colors, just a practical gray sweater and dark slacks, and went out into the hallway. The walk to the school took 20 minutes at a brisk pace. The morning chill was bracing. Zora loved this time. The city still belonged only to her, and the rare janitors shuffling their brooms. In the school cafeteria, the exhaust fans were already humming. The air was dense, humid, smelling of milk and butter. "Zora, honey, you on grits today?" called out the manager, a heavy-set woman with a kind but tired face. "On grits, Miss Beverly." Zora put on her white apron, tucked her braided hair under a cap, and set to work. Huge aluminum pots, heavy bags of grain. All of this had to be lifted, poured, stirred. When she took the huge ladle, looking like an oar in her hands, her muscles tensed. But there was a certain peace in this exertion. Everything was simple here. If you followed the recipe, the grits would turn out creamy and good. If you smiled at a child, they would smile back. Breakfast started at 8:30. Children flowed in a noisy river. "Thanks, Miss Zora. Can I have seconds?" "Oh man. Oatmeal again." Zora ladled out the porridge, her movements honed, almost like a dance. She knew which first graders liked it with butter and which ones didn't. She knew that the boy with the wild hair from 3B always lost his meal ticket, so she fed him anyway, giving him a wink. In this bustle, she forgot about the courts, about Tyrell, about the fact that Glenda Boudreaux pursed her lips when they met, as if she had seen a cockroach. Here Zora was needed. Here she was in her place. The workday ended at 4. Her legs were buzzing, and her clothes smelled of baking. She stopped at the store, bought some cottage cheese and apples. Nia had asked for pancakes. When she approached the house, her heart squeezed with habitual tenderness. The light was on in the third-floor window. Nia was already back from art school. Her daughter was the only thing Zora and Tyrell had created together that turned out beautiful. She didn't have her father's weakness, but she had his eyes big, slightly sad. Zora went up to her floor. The door opened before she even inserted the key. Mama, I drew a cat. That orange one from the basement. Nia, in a t-shirt stained with paint, hugged her around the waist. Zora buried her nose in her daughter's hair. She smelled of watercolors and baby shampoo. Show me. Zora smiled, feeling the fatigue recede. The evening passed quietly. They made pancakes, laughed, discussing the art teacher. Zora looked at the high ceilings of her kitchen, at the old oak cabinet where the good plate stood, and thought, we'll make it. The main thing is that we have a home. These walls protect us. The divorce was supposed to be officially finalized in a week. There couldn't be any property disputes. The apartment belonged to Zora's grandfather. Tyrell was merely listed on the residence records. He had said himself, hiding his eyes. Zora, you know I don't want what isn't mine. You and Nia live there. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang. The ring was sharp, demanding long. Zora flinched. Nia, who was drawing at the kitchen table, raised her head. Is that Daddy? I don't know, baby girl. Sit here. Zora wiped her hands on a towel and went to the hallway. A bad feeling stirred in her chest, cold and slippery. It wasn't Tyrell on the doorstep. It was a courier in a uniform jacket. Zora concade. Yes. Certified letter for you with notification. Sign here. She signed. The pen slipped in her fingers. The courier left, leaving her alone with a thick white envelope. The stamp bore the name of the district court. Probably rescheduled the hearing date, Zora thought, trying to calm her wildly beating heart. She returned to the kitchen, trying to look calm for her daughter's sake. She sat at the table, tore open the edge of the envelope. Inside lay not one sheet, but several stapled documents. On top was an official notice. Zora began to read. The letters jumped before her eyes. The meaning of the words came through slowly, as if she were reading in a foreign language. Court decision. Title of ownership declared invalid. She blinked. Read it again. At the bottom of the page, in dry legal language, the unbelievable was reported. The apartment, Grandpop's apartment, her fortress, no longer belonged to her. The document stated that back in 1995, during a title transfer, an error was made in the paperwork regarding the then minor Tyrell, who had been added to the deed by his father, Zora's first husband, long deceased, whom she barely remembered. And now, years later, Tyrell had restored his rights. But the most terrifying part was on the second sheet. Quitclaim deed. I, Tyrell Marcus Holcomb, hereby transfer my interest in the property to Glenda Marie Budrow. Glenda, her mother-in-law. Zora felt the floor drop out from under her feet. Tyrell hadn't just claimed the apartment. He had given everything to his mother. The very woman who always said Zora wasn't good enough for her son. That she was just a simple cook. Zora turned the last page. There was an eviction order. The red stamp looked like a death sentence. Mama. Nia's voice sounded from somewhere far away. Why are you so pale? Zora looked up. Her gaze fell on a line at the very bottom. Typed in bold font. Vacate the premises within 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days. Zora slowly lowered the hand, holding the letter onto the table, right into a spot of spilled flour. Her fingers were trembling. She looked around at the familiar walls, at her daughter's drawings hung on the fridge, at the old cabinet. All of this had just ceased to be their home. She didn't scream. She just forgot how to breathe. The silence in the apartment became deafening. And in this silence, Zora clearly heard her life collapsing. The crack was so loud she found it strange that Nia didn't hear it. Mama! Her daughter walked over and touched her shoulder. Zora covered her small warm hand with her own icy one. She had to be strong. She had to think of something. But only one thought beat in her head. He betrayed us. He fed us to her. 72 hours. The countdown had begun. She didn't wait for the elevator. Her legs carried her down the flights of stairs on their own skipping steps. In her hand she clutched the crumpled notification sheet, and in her ears, there was a noise like the hum of high-voltage wires. Tyrell was in the courtyard. Of course he was there. He was standing by his beat-up sedan, nervously smoking, and looking up at their windows. At the windows he had just stolen. Seeing Zora running out of the building, he flinched and dropped his cigarette, but didn't move. His shoulders were slumped, his gaze darting as if looking for a retreat. Zora flew up to him, gasping for air like a fish thrown onto ice. How? Was all she could breathe out. Her voice broke into a wheeze. Tyrell, how could you? It's Nia's home. He didn't look her in the eye. He looked at the toes of his boots kicking the asphalt. Zora, don't start, he mumbled, and his pathetic, guilty tone made her want to howl. Mama said it would be better for Nia's future. You know, your paycheck is unstable, and Mama will keep the apartment safe. It's just a formality. A formality? Zora shoved the crumpled paper under his nose. We're being evicted in 3 days. Did you sign this? Tell me, did you sign this yourself? Tyrell finally looked up. In his eyes was fear. Not for her, not for their daughter, but fear of a scene, fear of responsibility. I signed the deed over 6 months ago, he admitted quietly. Mama asked me to so there wouldn't be any disputes. She said it would be calmer this way. I wanted peace, Zora. Just peace. You wanted peace with your mama? Zora whispered, feeling something snap inside. The last thread connecting her to the past. And you sold us out for her approval. Tyrell backed away toward the car door. Don't be dramatic. Mama will let you stay for a while. I'll talk to her. Then he dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and the car, sputtering, jerked from its spot, leaving Zora in a cloud of gray exhaust. She remained standing in the middle of the empty courtyard. The autumn wind crept under her thin sweater, but she didn't feel the cold. Her legs suddenly became like cotton. Alien. Zora took a step, swayed, and sank heavily onto an old peeling bench by the entrance. Tears didn't flow immediately. First came the trembling. A fine, nasty tremor in her hands that was impossible to stop. She looked at her palms, red, roughened from work, and didn't recognize them. Why had she tried so hard? Why had she hauled those pots? Why had she painted the walls in the hallway, saving every penny? None of it made sense. She was nobody, an empty space that could be swept out of life with a single piece of paper. A strangled moan escaped her throat. She covered her face with her hands and doubled over. Tears gushed in a hot stream, scalding her fingers, dripping onto her jeans into the gray road dust beneath her feet. She cried loudly, ugly, gasping for air. Like children cry when they've been unfairly hurt. The whole world narrowed down to this dirty bench and the realization of complete, absolute ruin. No money for a lawyer, nowhere to go. In 72 hours she and Nia would be on the street. Something shuffled nearby. Zora didn't lift her head. She didn't care who saw her. Let them look. Let them laugh. Here, daughter. The voice was raspy like an ungreased hinge but unexpectedly soft. A hand appeared before her face, dark, knobby with soil ingrained in the skin. On the palm lay a sandwich wrapped in a clean paper napkin. Zora raised her tear-stained eyes. Before her stood Mr. Elias, the janitor. She had seen him every day for the last 10 years. He was always in the same canvas jacket, always silent, methodically raking leaves or chipping ice. Neighbors said he wasn't all there, that he only talked to the stray cats. He stood leaning on a broom and looked at her. In his faded gray eyes there was neither pity nor curiosity, only calm, deep understanding. Zora took a ragged breath, wiping her wet face with her sleeve. She didn't take the sandwich. Thank you, Mr. Elias. I don't need it. Take it. He placed the sandwich on the edge of the bench. You need strength. Crying burns a lot of energy. Zora suddenly giggled hysterically. The chuckle escaped on its own, bubbling wet. The situation was so absurd. Her crushed and destroyed, and the old janitor with a sandwich. Strength, she repeated, staring into the void. What do I need strength for? I've been thrown out, Elias, like a kitten. Because I'm nobody. Because I don't have a fancy last name or money or teeth to fight them with. She looked up at him, her eyes burned. Despair mixed with insane fatigue hit her head like cheap wine. You know what? She said, and her voice trembled with a malicious, desperate joke. Everyone wants to kick me out because I'm nobody. Maybe I should just marry you, Elias. Why not? At least you're kind. You give food. You don't take the roof from over people's heads. I'll become the janitor's wife. We'll sweep leaves together. At least it's some kind of protection. She expected him to chuckle, twirl a finger at his temple, or just walk away. But Elias didn't smile. He looked at her very intently, as if weighing her every word on invisible scales. Then he slowly nodded. "If you're serious, Zora," he said quietly and firmly, "then I agree." Zora froze. The laughter got stuck in her throat. She looked at his face etched with deep wrinkles and saw a strange determination there. You're joking," she whispered. "I never joke," Elias answered. He leaned the broom against a tree and brushed off his hands. "City Hall is open until 5. We have an hour. Got your ID?" Zora mechanically patted her pocket. Her ID was always with her. This was madness. Utter delirium to marry an old janitor she barely knew. A man who was possibly the neighborhood crazy. But then she remembered Tyrell's face. Remembered what his cowardly mama said. Remembered the cold tone of the eviction letter. Anger hot and dark rose in her in a new wave. They think she's broken. That she'll crawl away quietly. Seriously? She exhaled, standing up from the bench. Her legs were still trembling, but now from adrenaline. "Let's go, Elias. Let's get married." They walked down the street, a strange pair. A tear-stained woman in a simple sweater and a stooped old man in work clothes. Passers-by looked back, but Zora didn't give a damn. This was her rebellion. A senseless, stupid, hysterical rebellion against a universe that had decided to crush her. City Hall was empty and quiet, smelling of dust and cheap floor wax. The tired clerk looked at them over her glasses with undisguised surprise, but she accepted the documents. Elias paid the fee with crumpled bills he fished out of a deep pocket. "Do you take?" mumbled the woman, clearly wanting to close up her shift. "I do," said Zora. Her voice sounded hollow, as if underwater. "I do," answered Elias clearly, weightily. When they walked out onto the street, Zora held a marriage certificate in her hands. Another piece of paper. She looked at it, then at the sky, which was already starting to darken. "What have I done?" raced through her mind, but immediately came another thought, soothing and cold. "This changes nothing. It's just a shield. Let there be a man in the apartment, even an old janitor, for 48 hours, just so it's not so scary waiting for the knock at the door." "Go home, Zora," Elias said, not trying to take her arm. "Go to Nia. I'll come later. I don't have many things." He turned and walked toward his basement boiler room, shuffling his heavy boots. Zora watched him go, clutching the useless document in her hand, and felt a strange ringing emptiness spreading inside. She was married and she was completely, absolutely alone. The morning brought no relief, only a dry, eye-cutting clarity. Zora woke up on the couch without undressing. Nia was sleeping in the next room. In the hallway on the old rug stood Elias's worn-out boots. He had come in late after they had already gone to bed, quietly opened the door with his key, and seemed to have sat in the kitchen all night without turning on the light. Zora got up, feeling every bone ache. She needed to pack. The 72 hours were melting like snow in the spring sun. She pulled cardboard boxes from the closet, dusty, flattened, left over from her parents' move. First, books. Books are always heavy. She mechanically packed volumes into the box, trying not to look at the titles. Andersen's fairy tales. Grandpop used to read them to her. A cookbook. Mama's gift for graduating culinary school. Every item here screamed of a past that no longer existed. And then she froze with a book in her hands. A memory sharp and unpleasant pricked her heart. 5 years ago, Tyrell had first hinted about rewriting the documents. "Then Mama says it's safer, Zora." "So what?" she had answered. She was baking pies then, covered in flour, tired after a shift. She just waved her hand. "Do what you want, Tyrell. Just leave me be." She had been too lazy to get into it. It was easier to brush it off than to argue with his eternally dissatisfied mother. She herself, with her own hands, had given them this knife with which they were now cutting her. "Fool!" whispered Zora, slamming the book shut with force. "What a fool I am." The doorbell rang, not a courier this time. The knock was confident, proprietary. Zora flinched. Nia was still asleep. Elias couldn't be heard. He must have gone to sweep the courtyard. She opened the door. On the threshold stood Glenda Budrow. In her hands a tape measure and a notebook. Behind her, shifting from foot to foot, loomed a mover with a roll of plastic wrap. "Oh, you're up," the mother-in-law threw out instead of a greeting, squeezing into the apartment. She smelled of heavy perfume and victory. "We'll start with the hallway." This wallpaper horror so last century. Zora stepped back, clutching the apron she had managed to throw over her sweater to her chest. Miss Budrow, we still have 2 days by law. By law, honey, this is my apartment. Glenda clicked the tape measure, measuring the width of the doorway. And you are a guest here who has overstayed her welcome. Don't get underfoot, Earl. Bring in the plastic. Zora wanted to answer, wanted to kick them out, to scream, but her voice vanished. Her throat was seized by a spasm of guilt and powerlessness. She stood in the middle of the hallway watching strangers start to take over her home and felt like a ghost. At that moment, a car drove into the courtyard. It wasn't Tyrell's beat-up sedan and not a taxi. A heavy shiny black sedan slowly, like a predatory fish, swam into the broken asphalt yard, avoiding potholes with the grace of an ocean liner. Glenda Budrow froze by the window. Who is that? She frowned. To the neighbors or what? To the Johnsons. The car stopped right at their entrance. The driver got out, opened the rear door. A man appeared from within, tall, fit, in an impeccable charcoal gray suit. He adjusted his tie, took a leather briefcase from the seat, and confidently headed toward their building entrance. A minute later, the doorbell rang again. Glenda Budrow, forgetting about the tape measure, rushed to open it first. Who do you want? She asked in a tone where curiosity fought with suspicion. The man on the doorstep swept a quick cold glance over her and looked over her head. Good morning. I am looking for the wife of Mr. Elias Thorne. Silence hung instantly. Glenda opened her mouth but didn't make a sound. Earl the mover dropped the roll of plastic. Zora, still standing deep in the hallway in her old apron stained with boot dust, took a step forward. That's me. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to straighten up. I am his wife. The man nodded as if he expected exactly that. He entered the apartment neatly, stepping around the frozen Glenda, and handed Zora a business card. Atticus Creed, attorney at law. I represent the interests of your spouse. May I come in? We need to discuss asset management details. What assets? Wheezed Glenda Budrow. Her face went blotchy red. That old janitor, he's a bum. Atticus Creed slowly turned to her. In his gaze was so much icy contempt that Glenda involuntarily stepped back toward the wall. Mr. Elias Thorne is the sole beneficiary of a lawsuit regarding land holdings illegally seized in the 90s. Furthermore, he owns a controlling stake in a regional energy holding company. He turned back to Zora. Mrs. Thorne, your husband asked me to convey that all legal formalities have been settled. Zora stood there, feeling the ground leave from under her feet for the second time in 24 hours. But now it wasn't a fall into the abyss, but a takeoff on a roller coaster that took her breath away to the point of nausea. Elias, she whispered. He lived that way by his own choice, the lawyer said softly, lowering his voice. After the tragedy with his family, he believed he had to atone with Edisism. He was waiting. Waiting for what? Zora asked, looking at the lawyer with wide eyes. For someone who would see a human being in him, not a function, Atticus answered simply. Someone who would offer bread, not a kick. You offered him not just bread, Mrs. Thorne. You offered him a family. Glenda Budrow made a strange sound like a hiccup, and slumped onto the ottoman in the hallway. The tape measure fell from her hands and rolled across the floor with a clatter. Zora looked at the lawyer, at his expensive briefcase, at the shiny car outside the window. A whirlwind of thoughts spun in her head. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a trap. Things like this don't happen. She married a janitor out of desperation, and it turned out she had sold her freedom even more dearly. Or was this a chance? She wanted to run, just grab Nia by the hand and walk into nowhere. Away from this madness, from Tyrell's lies, from Glenda's malice, from the sudden millions of a strange old man. She wasn't looking for money. She just wanted peace. But then she looked into the open door of the room. Nia was sitting on the bed clutching a plush rabbit, looking fearfully at the strangers. In her eyes was the same fear Zora had yesterday. The fear of homelessness, the fear of being unwanted. Zora shifted her gaze to Glenda. The mother-in-law looked pathetic, but a new light was already kindling in her eyes. A light of greed and fear. If Zora left now, if she refused this game, Glenda would devour her and Nia. Zora slowly untied the strings of her apron, took it off, neatly folded it, and placed it on the nightstand. This movement cost her effort. Her hands were heavy as lead, but when she straightened up, her back was straight. "Mr. Creed," she said firmly, though everything inside was trembling, "please come into the kitchen. We have things to discuss, and you." She turned to Glenda and looked her straight in the eye for the first time in years, not lowering her gaze. "Miss Budrow, please leave my house and take your worker with you. The measurements are cancelled." Glenda opened her mouth to object, but met Zora's gaze. Dark, tired, but hard as granite, and remained silent. Zora walked into the kitchen, feeling the lawyer's gaze on her back. She had made a choice. She would stay in this game not for the money but for her daughter, and perhaps to finally stop being a victim. Even if for that she had to live with a stranger who turned out to be a millionaire. Zora expected wealth to be loud, to burst into life with fanfares, champagne, and the sparkle of diamonds. But Elias's wealth turned out to be quiet and sterile. The next day, they moved not to a mansion in the suburbs, but to a spacious penthouse downtown in a new building that looked at the city with the glass eyes of panoramic windows. It was too clean here, too bright, and too empty. Elias took the guest room. He brought only his old suitcase and that icon that hung in his basement. He still wore a simple shirt, though now it was new and ironed. He still kept silent, sitting in the armchair in the evenings and looking at the city lights. Zora felt like an imposter. She walked on expensive parquet in her old house slippers, afraid to leave marks. Nia was delighted with her new room, which looked like a princess's castle. But Zora saw how her daughter missed her neighborhood friends who weren't here. Work became unbearable. "Zora, honey, they say you're a millionaire now?" asked Lena, the lunch lady, when Zora walked into the kitchen. There was poison in Lena's voice, sweet and sticky. "Why are you hauling pots then? Or are you afraid the old man will change his mind and leave the inheritance to the cat?" "Lena, stop it," Zora said quietly, putting on her apron. "Stop what?" Lena didn't let up, loudly clattering plates. "The whole neighborhood is buzzing. Snagged an old man. Took advantage of his sility. Smart woman. We break our backs here for pennies." And Zora clenched her teeth until her jaw ached. She couldn't tell them the truth. The truth that she was saving herself and her daughter. The truth that this old man saved her. To them she had become the enemy, an alien. Someone who made it out but unfairly. In the evening she returned to the golden cage, completely shattered. Elias was sitting in the kitchen drinking tea from a saucer out of old habit. Seeing her face, he set the cup aside. "Hard?" he asked. Zora sank onto the chair opposite. "They hate me, Elias. Everyone thinks I'm a scammer." Elias chuckled into his mustache. "Let them think. People always hate what they don't understand or what they envy." He rummaged in the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out a small heavy iron key, old with a shaped bit darkened by time. "Take it." He put the key on the table in front of her. "What is this?" "A safe." Zora touched the cold metal wearily. "No, this is memory." Elias looked at the key with unexpected tenderness. "It's for a locker at the old warehouse on Chestnut Street. Go tomorrow alone. You need to know who you married so you don't listen to gossip." The next day, Saturday, Zora went. The warehouse turned out to be an old brick building smelling of dampness and machine oil. The watchman, seeing the key, silently led her to an iron door deep in the corridor. Inside it was dark. Zora found the switch. A dim bulb illuminated shelves packed with boxes and old trunks. She opened the first trunk. Books, technical literature, blueprints, tubes, engineering designs, hydrodynamics, bridge design. On the fly leaves of the books was a book plate. Library of E.M. Thorne. Thorne. That was Elias's real last name. She opened the second box. Letters. Bundles of letters tied with twine. Photographs. Black and white shots of a happy family. A young Elias, a beautiful woman, 2 children. They were laughing, sitting on the hood of a Cadillac. Zora began to read the letters. The handwriting was sweeping, confident. These were letters from his brothers. First warm, then businesslike, then threatening. "Elias, you have to understand the time for romance is over. The land is worth money. The factory needs to be sold. If you don't sign, we'll do it without you. You're getting in everyone's way. Nobody needs your principles. We'll have you declared incompetent if you don't leave." Zora read, sitting on the dusty floor, and a picture of terrible betrayal rose before her. Elias wasn't just an engineer. He was the head of a major enterprise, And he was betrayed by the closest people, his brothers. They took everything from him except his honor. And he left on his own so as not to fight with his own blood. He chose a broom and a basement to save his soul. Lord, whispered Zora, how much pain he was in. She remembered her suffering over the apartment. It seemed petty compared to the decades of silent exile this man had chosen. He didn't trust anyone because he knew the price of human greed. And he trusted her. Zora put the letters back. Her hands no longer trembled. Now she knew who Elias was. He wasn't a senile old man. He was a warrior who laid down his arms because he didn't want to shoot at his own. When she returned home, Elias was waiting for her. A thick folder lay on the table. Understood? He asked, not looking at her. Understood. Zora answered quietly. She walked over and, obeying an impulse, put her hand on his shoulder. It was hard and thin. Thank you for trusting me. Elias covered her hand with his dry palm for a moment. Then he removed his hand and pushed the folder toward her. Now about your war, Zora. Atticus did some work. This is for you. Zora opened the folder. The first sheet was a list of lawyers the best law firm in the city paid in full. But further on it was more interesting. Glenda Marie Budrow, real estate transactions. Zora began to read and her eyes widened. This wasn't just the story of the apartment. This was a story of fraud. Glenda Budrow, it turned out, didn't help lonely old ladies in their building for nothing. 2 apartments in a neighboring building had passed into her ownership via lifetime care contracts 3 months before the owners' deaths. Strange deaths, quick ones, and there was also an extract from the city records archives. That very error in Grandpop's apartment documents. It turned out that the request for correction was filed by Glenda herself by power of attorney from Tyrell 5 years ago. She had been preparing this takeover for years. Zora looked up at Elias. Inside her a cold, calculating rage was rising. Fear was gone. Only the desire to protect remained. This is a criminal case, she said. It's a weapon, corrected Elias. Use it not to take revenge but to survive. Your husband, Tyrell, he is weak, but his mother is a predator. You can't negotiate with predators. You can only scare them. Zora closed the folder. She felt the weight of this paper, the weight of others' sins. I'm ready, she said, and for the first time in a long time she truly believed what she was saying. She had Elias's truth and she had Glenda's dirt. The war was just beginning and now Zora was armed. Monday morning Atticus Creed picked her up at 8. The car smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Zora sat in the back seat, clutching the folder of documents, feeling like a tightrope walker looking down for the first time. But there was no fear, only focus. In court everything went surprisingly fast. The judge, a tired woman with a high hairdo, didn't even look at Glenda's lawyer, a jumpy young guy in a cheap suit. Atticus spoke quietly, weightily. Every word lay into the record like a brick in a wall. Your Honor, based on the presented facts regarding possible fraudulent activities with real estate, we move for injunctive relief, a ban on any transactions with the apartment, suspension of eviction until the investigation is complete, and considering the revealed episodes with other properties. He paused significantly. We asked to freeze the assets of the defendant, Miss Glenda Budrow. The judge nodded. The bang of the gavel sounded like a gunshot, but not at Zora, at Glenda. When they left the courtroom, Glenda Budrow stood by the window in the hallway. She was pale, lips compressed into a thin line. Seeing Zora, she didn't rush with curses, didn't scream. She just turned away. And in this gesture, scared, defensive, Zora saw her first victory. The predator had retreated. That same evening, Zora's phone came to life. Tyrell flashed on the screen. She looked at the vibrating device for a long time. Elias, sitting opposite with a newspaper, didn't raise his head, but stopped rustling the pages. Zora pressed answer. Zora. Tyrell's voice trembled. He was sobbing. Can you come out? I'm at the entrance, please. She went down. Tyrell stood by his car, hunched over like a beaten dog. He was fiddling with a cap in his hands. Seeing her, he took a step forward but stopped. Zora, I didn't know. He began to speak quickly, swallowing words. I swear I didn't know. Mama said it was just insurance. She didn't say she would kick you out like this with police. I thought we would work it out. Zora looked at him and realized with surprise that she no longer felt pain or love or hate, only a light, almost clinical disgust. "You signed the documents, Tyrell," she said calmly. "You're a grown man. You couldn't not know." "She pressured me." Tyrell covered his face with his hands. "You know her. She has high blood pressure. Her heart. She said I would drive her to the grave." "Zora, forgive me. I'm a fool, a weakling, but I didn't want harm to come to Nia." He was crying for real. Tears flowed down his cheeks. He smeared them with a dirty palm. "Go home," Tyrell sighed. "Zora, sort it out with your mama. Don't come to me anymore. The lawyers decide everything now." She turned and walked to the entrance. With her back, she felt his gaze full of despair. But she felt light. She had shed this burden. She was no longer the wife of a mama's boy. She was free. On Friday, she did what she had dreamed of all her life. She bought tickets. "Nia, pack your bags," she shouted, running into the apartment. "We're going to the ocean." "To the ocean?" Her daughter dropped her tablet. "Right now? Right tomorrow morning? For the weekend?" Those were 2 days of absolute unclouded happiness. They flew to Atlantic City. The ocean was cold, autumnal, steel cold, but the air smelled of salt and freedom. They walked along the boardwalk, ate saltwater taffy, fed the seagulls. Nia laughed so loudly as she hadn't laughed in 6 months. Zora sat on the sand, turning her face to the stingy November sun, and thought, "It's all behind us. The court is on her side. The apartment is under arrest. Glenda can't do anything. She has Elias's money, not for luxury, but for a start. She'll quit the school, open the small bakery she dreamed of, bake her signature cherry pies." She felt strong. She had stood her ground. She had protected her child. Sunday evening they returned. The house smelled of cleanliness and comfort. Elias met them with herbal tea. "Well, did you breathe your fill?" he asked, smiling with the corners of his eyes. "We did, Mr. Elias." Nia rushed to him and hugged him. The old man froze, then hesitantly patted her on the head. "That's good," he muttered. "That's good." Monday morning the official court order arrived. Zora unfolded it with a confident smile. By court order it is established. Suspend eviction proceedings against Zora Kincaid and minor Nia Holcomb until a final decision is rendered in the case regarding the invalidity of the transaction. The defendant is permitted to reside in the disputed premises. Zora exhaled. This was an official paper armor, a shield. No one could kick them out onto the street. The war for the apartment had moved into a positional phase and time was working for her. Glenda was cornered. Tyrell was broken. She put the paper on the table and poured herself some coffee. The sun was shining outside. Life was getting better. For the first time in many months, she felt solid ground under her feet. She had won. "Mama, I'm off to school," Nia shouted from the hallway. "Run along, baby girl. Good luck on the test." The door slammed shut. Zora took a sip of hot coffee, enjoying the silence. She even started humming a tune under her breath. Plans for renovation were already spinning in her head. Repaper the hallway. Buy new curtains. She didn't know that silence can be deceptive. That the calm before the storm isn't just a pretty phrase. She didn't know that while she was walking by the ocean, Glenda Budrow hadn't been sitting idle. That a wounded beast is most dangerous precisely when it seems to have gone quiet in its den. Zora finished her coffee, feeling like the mistress of her destiny. She didn't yet know that this was the last peaceful sip in her life before the world collapsed again. The doorbell rang not in the morning but in the evening when Zora and Nia were doing homework. 2 people stood on the doorstep. A woman with a folder and a man in a police uniform. Child Protective Services. The woman introduced herself dryly, not looking Zora in the eye. "We have an order for the temporary removal of the child for a psychological evaluation." Zora froze in the doorway, feeling the blood drain from her face. "What? What evaluation? What are you talking about?" A report was received from the grandmother, Glenda Marie Budrow, stating that the child is in a socially dangerous situation. The mother entered into a fictitious marriage with an incompetent individual, leads an immoral lifestyle, puts the child's psyche at risk. "That's garbage," shouted Zora, blocking the passage. "You have no right. We are fine." "Ma'am, do not obstruct," said the officer wearily. "Just a check. If everything is clean, we'll return her. But right now we need to take the girl." The grandmother has been appointed temporary guardian for the period of the proceedings. Nia ran out into the hallway, clutching a textbook to her chest. Mama, what happened? Nothing, sunshine. Nothing. Zora rushed to her, hugged her, feeling the thin body tremble. It's a mistake. They're leaving right now. But they didn't leave. The court hearing was set for 2 days later. An emergency hearing. The room was small and stuffy. Glenda Budrow sat at the plaintiff's table, straight as a pole in a strict black suit. Next to her sat an expensive lawyer, not that twitchy boy, but a new one, sleek with oily eyes, and a psychologist, a woman with a cold fish-like gaze. Your Honor, Glenda's lawyer began, my client is extremely concerned about her granddaughter's fate. The child's mother, Zora Consincade, committed an act testifying to deep personal deformation. She married a local marginal, a man living in a basement literally the day after receiving news of the divorce. Is this the behavior of a fit mother? This is either madness or cynical calculation involving the child. Zora clenched her fist so hard her nails dug into her palm. That's a lie, she shouted, jumping up. Elias is a decent man. He saved us when you kicked us out on the street. Silence, barked the judge. And then they called the witness. Tyrell walked into the hall, not raising his head. He walked to the stand, dragging his feet like a convict. Witness Hulcom. The judge addressed him. Tell the court what you know about your ex-wife's marriage. Tyrell was silent. A second, 2, 3. Ringing silence hung in the hall. Zora looked at his back at the familiar stoop and prayed. Tell the truth, Tyrell. Just tell the truth. He sighed deeply, convulsively, and spoke. She was always unstable, Your Honor. Tantrums, scandals. She pressured me, forced me to sign the consent for divorce. And this marriage, he stumbled as if words stuck in his throat, but then blurted them out quickly like a learned lesson. It's a sham. She found this old man to hide her income, to blackmail me and Mama. She said she would take everything from us. Zora collapsed onto her chair. The air in her lungs ran out. He lied. Her Tyrell, her daughter's father, stood and lied under oath, looking at the floor. Because Mama said so. Because Mama threatened or promised something. The judge wrote something. The psychologist nodded. During the break in the hallway, Zora ran into Glenda. The mother-in-law didn't turn away. She walked up close and Zora smelled her perfume. The sweet, suffocating smell of decay. Thought you won, girl? Glenda asked quietly. Thought you found a rich sugar daddy and you're the queen. Zora looked up at her. There were no tears in her eyes, only emptiness. Why are you doing this? Nia is a living human being. You are breaking her life. Glenda chuckled crookedly, viciously. I'm breaking it. And you? She poked a finger into Zora's chest. You wholly innocent. You knew Tyrell was weak. You lived with him for 10 years. You saw he wasn't a man. You carried everything on yourself and let him be a rag. You grew this in him, Zora. With your silence, with your I'll do it myself. And now you're surprised that the rag didn't become a wall. You chose such a husband yourself and allowed him to become this way. The words hit Zora harder than a slap because it was the truth. Bitter, poisonous truth. She always knew Tyrell was weak. She pied him. She decided for him. She allowed him to hide behind her back. Thinking it was love, but it was aiding and abetting. She had nursed a traitor with her own hands. Zora straightened up. Pain pierced her chest, but it was honest pain. Yes, she said quietly. You're right. I am guilty. I allowed him to be a nobody. I closed my eyes. Glenda raised an eyebrow triumphantly. But that doesn't justify you, Ms. Budrow. Zora's voice became hard, metallic. I was blind, but I'm not evil. And you eat your children. You devoured Tyrell. Now you want to devour Nia, but I won't let you. Do you hear? I won't give her to you. Well, see, hissed Glenda, and walked away to her lawyer. The court's decision was announced an hour later for the duration of the comprehensive psychological and psychiatric evaluation, determined the residence of the minor, Nia Holcomb, with her father and grandmother. The mother is allowed visits twice a week in the presence of a social worker. Zora didn't hear the last words. She only saw Nia being let out through a side door. The girl looked back. Her eyes were huge, full of horror. She wasn't crying. She looked at her mom as if saying goodbye forever. Mama. Her lips moved soundlessly. I'll come get you, shouted Zora. But the bailiff blocked her path. "I'll get you soon. You hear?" The door slammed. Zora was left alone in the middle of the courtroom. Atticus Creed gathered papers with a stone face. "We will file an appeal, Mrs. Thorne. This is a flagrant violation. False testimony." "I don't need an appeal," Zora said hollowly. "I need my daughter." She walked out onto the street. It was raining, cold, driving rain washing the colors from the city. She got into a taxi and went to Elias's empty, huge alien apartment. At home, she didn't turn on the light. She sat on the floor in the hallway, pressing her back against the door and slid down. The silence in the apartment was terrifying. It rang. In the child's room on the bed, sat the plush rabbit Nia had forgotten to take. Zora took the rabbit in her hands, buried her face in the soft plush and howled. It wasn't crying. It was the howl of a wounded animal whose cub had been taken away. She howled, rocking from side to side, cursing herself. Tyrell, Glenda, this city, this money. Everything had collapsed. She lost. She had millions, but she couldn't buy an hour with her own child. A silhouette appeared in the darkness of the hallway. Elias. He didn't approach. He stood in the kitchen doorway, leaning on the jamb and listened to her howl. He knew that right now no words would help. Right now, one just needed to howl. But when Zora quieted down, exhausted, he said quietly, "Tears are done." Zora raised her head. "I died, Elias." "No," he said harshly. "You are alive and the dead don't fight. Get up. We have work." Zora looked at him. There was no pity in his voice. There was a command. And this command forced her to rise from the floor. Her legs didn't hold her, but she stood. "What work?" She whispered. "The court decided by the law of lies," Elias cut off. "But we will go by the law of truth. We have one more trump card and it will come tonight." "Who?" "Someone they don't expect." There was a quiet, almost inaudible knock at the door. 3 short raps. Pause. 2 more. Zora froze. She looked at Elias, then at the door. Who could come to them at midnight? She went to the peephole. A woman stood on the landing. In a hood pulled over her eyes, nervously looking around. Zora opened the door. On the threshold stood Tasha, Tyrell's sister. That same quiet, browbeaten Tasha who'd been afraid of her own shadow all her life and couldn't say a word against her mother. She was trembling, clutching a wet plastic bag in her hands. "Let me in, Zora," she whispered, teeth chattering. I stole this from Mama." Zora stepped back, letting her inside. Tasha entered. And with her the smell of rain and hope entered the apartment. Desperate last-ditch but living hope. Tasha sat in the kitchen clutching a cup of hot tea with both hands, shaking so much that tea spilled onto the table. "I couldn't take it anymore, Zora," she whispered, looking into the mug. "I endured everything. How Mama yelled at me. How she broke Tyrell. But Nia," she raised tear-stained eyes to Zora. "Tonight I heard Mama locked Nia in the bedroom. The girl was crying asking for you and Mama. She told her, 'Your mother is crazy. She abandoned you. If you don't tell the nice psychologist lady that Daddy is good and Mama is bad, they'll give you to an orphanage with evil caretakers.'" Zora felt a cold white rage rising inside her. Not hysteria, not despair, but the icy calm of an executioner. "I recorded it." Tasha pulled a phone out of her pocket. With a shaking finger, she pressed the screen. From the speaker came Glenda's voice, screeching, distorted with malice. "Remember, you ungrateful brat. You will say that Mama brought men home, that she drank, otherwise you'll rot in a shelter. Understood?" And Nia's quiet sob stifled. "Understood, Grandma." Zora closed her eyes. She wanted to smash something, destroy that woman, tear her to pieces. "That's not all." Tasha reached into the bag she brought. "I climbed into the crawl space, looking for old toys for Nia so she would calm down, and I found a flour tin. Old tin. Mama hid it behind shoe boxes. She laid a yellowed envelope on the table. It's Grandpop's will, Zora, the real one." Zora took the envelope. The paper was dry and brittle. She unfolded the sheet. "I, Albert James Winfield, bequeath the apartment at the address to my granddaughter Zora Kincaid, without the right of transfer to third parties, any transactions regarding alienation to be considered void." "She knew," whispered Zora. "She knew all these years. She stole it when Grandpa died," nodded Tasha. "I remember she was fussing then, digging through papers. I was little didn't understand. And then she said there was no will, and everything was processed by law to Tyrell as a resident. She waited. Zora waited for the moment. Elias, who had been standing by the window the whole time, silently approached the table. He took the will, scanned the text. Original, he stated, notarized. With this document we can not only get the apartment back. With this document we can put Glenda in jail. I'll go to the police right now. Zora jumped up. With this recording, with this paper, they'll return my daughter immediately. Elias put a hand on her shoulder, heavy as a tombstone. Sit, Zora. Nia's there with that monster. If you go now at night, the duty officer will take the statement. Bureaucracy will start. Glenda will hire lawyers, say the recording is fake, that you planted the will. This will drag on for months and Nia will be with her. Zora sat down, squeezing her hands until her knuckles turned white. What do you suggest? Elias looked at Tasha. When is Glenda's birthday? Tasha flinched. Day after tomorrow, Saturday. Will she celebrate? Of course. Tasha chuckled nervously. It's a jubilee, almost 64. She invited everyone. Aunt Vera from Cleveland, neighbors, even the vice principal of your school, to show that she won, that the granddaughter is with her, the apartment is with her, and you are in the dirt. Elias slowly nodded. An unkind light lit up in his eyes. That's when we'll come. You want to make a scene? Asked Zora. I want to hold court, Elias answered. Not the kind where corrupt lawyers juggle words, but a court where there is no right to appeal. The court of public opinion. We will destroy her reputation. We will destroy her power over Tyrell. We will destroy her lies in front of everyone she is so afraid to lose. Zora looked at the will, then at the phone with the recording. 2 days, she said. Nia has to hold out there for 2 days. I'll be with her, Tasha said quietly. I won't leave her side for a step. I swear, Zora, I'll sleep by her door. Mama won't touch me. She needs me to chop salads. Zora walked over to her sister-in-law and hugged her for the first time in 10 years. Thank you, Tasha. You are braver than I thought. I just want Tyrell to see, sobbed Tasha. See who our mother really is. Maybe this will wake him up. They sat in the kitchen until dawn working out the plan. Every detail had to work perfectly. Atticus Creed, the lawyer, would prepare the legal base. Elias would provide technical support. And Zora had to play the most difficult role of her life. The role not of a victim, but of an avenging sword. In the morning, Tasha left, hiding the phone with a copy of the recording in her underwear. The original and the will remained in Elias's safe. Zora stood by the window and looked at the city. Somewhere out there in the old house, her daughter was waking up. Hold on, little one, she said mentally. Just a little longer. Mama is coming. And this time Mama won't cry. She felt something finally harden inside her. Fear was gone. Pity was gone. Only a cold, clear goal remained. Glenda Budrow wanted war. She would get it, and it would be her last battle. Saturday evening turned out muggy, as if a thunderstorm that just couldn't break hung right over the old brownstone. The windows of Glenda Budow's apartment were thrown open. The clatter of dishes, laughter, and the smell of fried chicken drifted from there. Zora stood before the entrance door. She wore a simple dress, her hair gathered in a bun. No armor, no weapon in her hands, just a small purse. Next to her stood Elias in his unchanging gray jacket and Tasha, pale but determined. It's time, said Elias quietly. They went up to the 3rd floor. The door to the apartment was ajar, waiting for late guests. Zora pushed it and entered. In the living room, cluttered with heavy furniture, about 15 people sat at a set table. Aunt Vera with her husband, neighbors, Vice Principal Ms. Johnson with a glass of wine. At the head of the table, like a queen on a throne, sat Glenda Budrow. She wore a new blue dress, a string of pearls around her neck. Next to her, hunched over, sat Tyrell. Nia was jammed into the very corner between the cabinet and the sofa with a plate she hadn't even touched. The noise of conversation died instantly, as if someone turned off the sound. All heads turned to the doors. You. Glenda Budrow slowly rose. There was so much venom in her voice that it seemed the flowers in the vases should wilt. Who let you in? Get out. I have a party. Zora walked to the center of the room. She didn't look at the guests. She looked only at her mother-in-law. I didn't come to celebrate, Miss Budrow. I came to take my daughter and return what you stole. What? Glenda theatrically grabbed her heart. People, do you hear? She's drunk. Tyrell, take her out. Tyrell twitched but didn't stand up. He looked at Zora with horror. Zora took the yellowed envelope from her purse, placed it on the festive tablecloth, right between the potato salad and the aspic. Grandpop's will, she said clearly so everyone in the room could hear. The very one you hid in the flower tin 20 years ago. The very one where it says the apartment belongs only to me, and that any deals by Tyrell are illegal. Silence hung in the room. And Vera stopped chewing. The vice principal put her glass on the table. It's a fake, screeched Glenda. Her face went blotchy red. You're lying about everything. No, Mama, it's the truth. Tasha's voice sounded quiet, but in this silence it was like thunder. She stepped forward. I found it. Where you hid it. Glenda looked at her daughter as if she saw a snake. You traitor. I fed you, clothed you. And also, interrupted Elias, taking a phone out of his pocket. We have something for Child Protective Services and for everyone present. He pressed the button. Glenda's voice, distorted by malice, filled the room. Remember, you ungrateful brat. You will say that Mama brought men home. Otherwise you'll rot in a shelter. Understood? The neighbor from the first floor gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. Vice Principal Miss Johnson slowly pushed back her chair and stood up. Miss Budrow, she said in an icy tone. Seems I have the wrong door. Miss Johnson, wait. It's an edit. They did it on purpose. Glenda darted her gaze around the guests' faces, looking for support, but saw only disgust. Tyrell slowly raised his head. He looked at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. Real without the mask of a holy martyr. He saw a monster who was ready to break his daughter's psyche for square footage. Did you really say that to Nia? He asked harshly. Tyrell's son, they want to make us fight. Did you say that to my daughter? He bellowed, jumping up and overturning his chair. Glenda recoiled. Her empire, built on lies and manipulation, was collapsing right before her eyes to the sound of broken dishes and the whispers of neighbors. Zora walked to the corner where Nia sat. The girl was huddled in a ball, covering her ears with her hands. Nia. Zora knelt before her. It's over. Let's go home. Nia opened her eyes, saw her mom, and threw herself around her neck with such desperate sobbing that Zora's own breath caught. She picked her daughter up in her arms, turned to the table. I won't call the police today, Zora said, looking at the destroyed Glenda, who had slumped onto a chair, old and pathetic. For the sake of Grandpop's memory, for Tasha's sake. But tomorrow morning, Miss Budrow, you will pack your things and go to your sisters in the country. The apartment is mine, and if you ever come near Nia again, that's when I will destroy you. She walked out of the room without looking back. Elias followed her. Tasha followed her, and in the apartment remained only an old woman, left with nothing, and her son, who was crying, dropping his head onto the tablecloth stained with wine. 6 months passed. May turned out warm. In the courtyard of the brownstone, lilacs bloomed, filling the air with a sweet, intoxicating scent. Zora sat on that very same bench where she had once cried from hopelessness. Now the bench was freshly painted green. Beside it stood a stroller with a doll. Nia was playing house with her friends by the sandbox. Zora looked at her daughter and smiled. But in the corners of her eyes lay new wrinkles that weren't there before. Victory didn't erase memory. She remembered Tyrell's betrayal. Remembered that terrible howl in the empty apartment. This stayed with her forever. Like a scar that aches in bad weather. Tyrell went up north to work on the rigs. He sent money but didn't call. He was ashamed, and Zora was grateful to him for that shame. The only decent feeling he turned out to be capable of. Glenda lived in a remote village near Cleveland. Tasha sometimes drove to see her, brought medicine, but always returned silent and sad. And Elias. The entrance door opened and Elias Thorne stepped out. He no longer wore janitor's coveralls. He wore a comfortable corduroy jacket and a hat. He looked like a retired professor. Zora. He sat down next to her, squinting at the sun. The foundation called. We got a grant to open 2 more social cantons. That's wonderful, Elias. Zora covered his hand with hers. She didn't become a wealthy idler. Elias's money went to work. They opened a charity foundation, the Hearth, helping women who found themselves in difficult situations, those kicked out of their homes, those with nowhere to go. Zora ran the kitchen herself, baked bread, listened to other stories and gave advice not as a mentor but as a survivor. And she also had her own small bakery on the corner, Grandpop's Bread. It always smelled of cinnamon and vanilla there. "You're tired," Elias said, looking at her intently. "No," she admitted. "Sometimes it seems to me that I'm still running, that if I stop everything will disappear." "It won't disappear," he said firmly. "You built your house on rock, Zora, not on sand." Nia ran up to them, flushed, happy. "Grandpa Elias, Mama, look what beetle we found." Elias leaned down, examining the beetle in the child's palm with a serious look. "A June bug," he declared authoritatively. "Rare guest. He needs freedom, Nia. Let him go on to the lilacs." The girl ran off to the bushes. Zora leaned back on the bench and closed her eyes. The wind rustled the leaves. Somewhere far away a streetcar hummed. She was free. She was rich, not in money but in the people who were near. Elias, who became the father she never had. Tasha, who became a sister. Nia, but in her heart still lived a quiet, bright sadness. Sadness for that naive Zora, who believed that love conquers all. That Zora died in the courtroom, but a new one was born. Strong, wise, knowing how to forgive but not forget. "Let's go have tea," asked Elias. "I bought your favorite cookies." "Let's go," Zora smiled. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked to the entrance of her home. The home she had fought for. The home where love now lived. Quiet, calm, smelling of bread and lilacs. Friends, that is the end of Zora's story. A story about how at the very bottom of despair, you can find a helping hand. And about how real family isn't always those with whom we share blood, but those with whom we share a soul. What do you think? Did Zora do the right thing by not putting Glinda in jail? Is the punishment of loneliness enough for such a woman? And could Tyrell have become different if Zora had been tougher with him from the very beginning? Write your opinion in the comments. It is very important for me to know what you think. Life is often more complicated than any soap opera, and perhaps some of you have had similar situations. If this story touched you, if you worried for Zora and Nia, please like this video. It is the best gratitude for the author. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. We have many more of them and each of them is about us. All the best to you. At the end of this video, a window will appear in the middle of the screen. Please click on that window.